Welcome to this video lecture series on ITIL Foundation. This is Topic 1, Key Concepts of Service Management, Video 4, Outcomes, Costs, and Risks. Welcome, friends. Always glad to see you here. So, let's get back to a little review of what value is. Value is the perceived benefit of a service minus the perceived costs and risks involved. So on one side you have the benefits, which is the perceived value comes from the benefits minus the risks and the costs. So you have the good things and you have the bad things, and they need to balance out. So in business, we measure value using the value proposition, as you see right down here. The value proposition is quite simple. It is benefits minus disbenefits. Or if you prefer, perceived benefits minus the perception of cost and risk. That is what we define as value, the gap between those things. The more benefits outweigh the costs and the risks, the better this thing is. The more value we have. And yes, we can have negative value. We really try to avoid that. When you have a much higher level of cost and risk and a lower level of benefit, we would like to avoid that if we can. ITIL emphasizes value is subjective. It depends on the customer's perspective. So even though we do have a definition for it, and that definition is very useful to us, always remember, it's most important what the end consumer, how that person or that group of people perceive value, because we will be judged on that ultimately. We may be looking at the same thing from different points of view. The customer sees the number 66 and the customer is correct. That makes perfect sense. And we, from the point of view of the provider, see the number 99, and that makes perfect sense to us also. The key takeaway, value is realized when outcomes meet customer expectations. And we do try to satisfy their expectations. We try not to say, oh, we're right, you're wrong. That's number 99. We try to understand it from their point of view. So an outcome is the fairly new thing now. We don't just talk about features. We don't just talk about functions. We don't just talk about use cases. Now, we talk about outcomes. An outcome is the result or effect of a service being used. So not only what does a service do for me, but how does it make my life and my job better? It can be positive, where we get the desired results, or it can be negative, when we reap those unintended consequences. For example, I have a small, I wouldn't call it a farm. I have some animals on something that's like a farm. And I have a few chickens there in a hen house. Now, the reason I built the hen house was because I had some foxes coming onto the property and stealing eggs and then eventually stealing chickens. I built the house to protect them, and at night I would close them in and they would be protected, but during the day they would still be attacked. So I had to get a dog in order to protect the chickens. These are controls. The hen house is a control. It was somewhat effective. And the dog is also a control, and it is more effective. Except the neighbor boy wanted to befriend the dog, and the dog's insane. And the dog bit the kid. I'm very lucky that the neighbor was so cool about it and said he knows he's not supposed to come on your property. So I paid for the kid to get stitches, and I had to put the dog on a chain. This is called a secondary risk. When you have a control that is trying to help you reduce your risk, but it creates a new risk, that new risk the control creates is called a secondary risk. Yes, unfortunately, it is a true story. Our focus here, services create outcomes that help customers achieve their objectives. For example, I had a bicycle and I wanted to use it for exercise in order for it to improve my heart. But I had an injury on my leg and a quite painful tendon pop. And when I went to talk to the guy about getting another bike, he said, you know what? Maybe you don't want to use your bike for such long distance stuff anymore. You can use your bike for commuting, it's short. You can use your bike to go to the store, it's short. But those use cases are fine. But the use case of you riding 30 kilometers 4 times a week, that's probably not the right thing for your legs, even though it's a good thing for your heart. And he recommended instead, I use an elliptical. See, he was focused not on the functions. He was focused not on the features. He was a good guy. He was focused on the outcome. Another example, a cloud backup service. What's the outcome of it? Peace of mind and data availability. There are so many things that can go wrong where you just have to roll back and recover your data. I hope you're backing up daily. Now let's talk about cost. This is one of the downsides. Outcome is a good side. Outcome is a benefit. Cost is a disbenefit, a necessary evil. Cost is equal to resources consumed to deliver a service, money, time, and effort. Customers consider both direct and indirect costs. So direct cost is asking the question, does it still exist when I switch this thing off? Costs that support many things and continue anyway. For example, your rent, corporate network and infrastructure, IT management salaries, and things like this. You turn the service off, those costs are still there. For direct costs, these disappear when you switch something off. Costs that exist only because the service is being used. For example, software license, vendor subscriptions, tool-specific training, electricity, etc. The service off, the cost stops. A software subscription may have licensing costs, training, integration costs. High cost with low outcome is a perception of low value. A high cost with a low outcome is not desirable. We can represent it with a common quadrant system here. And of course, the high cost, low outcome is not what we desire. Low cost, low outcome is some value, but not much. The cost is low, the value, the benefit is low. It's better than nothing. Low cost, high outcome is excellent value. The green quadrant is what we want most of all. And high cost, high outcome is fair value. You know, it could be top model of Mercedes-Benz and top cost as well, but there's still some kind of value there if you can afford it. Now let's talk about risk, the third factor. Risk is uncertainty. It's uncertainty of outcomes affecting achievement of their objective. We're not sure that this thing is going to work. We'll never be sure if it's going to work until we've tried it. It includes service downtime, security breaches, poor performance, and all those things that can go wrong. Customers have to weigh the likelihood times the impact when assessing value. That is a basic way we calculate risk. Likelihood of something going wrong times the impact of how much it will hurt if it goes wrong. Quite often, it's represented in a heat map such as this. This is a risk heat map. And in the risk heat map, you see we have impact on one side and likelihood at the bottom. And so the red areas are where we spend most of our time and our money trying to manage things. they get most of our attention. If we still have time and money left over, we will also manage the orange. Because we're limited on time and money, the yellow parts we'll probably monitor. And the green parts, it's not likely to happen, and if it does happen, it's not likely to hurt. Frankly, we'll just check in with it once in a while to see how it's going. We won't even closely monitor it unless we can do so in an automated way without spending a lot of money. Risk management is about prioritization. High risk will reduce the perceived value, even if the outcomes are good. So how do these three factors work together? Well, value equals perceived benefits divided by the costs and risks. So ITIL emphasizes the following. Maximize your positive outcomes. Work hard to make sure those benefits are realized. And in a project, you should have people whose job it is for each and every specific benefit. You should have somebody assigned, one person, to follow that benefit, to track it, to encourage it to happen, to champion it. Minimize costs wherever possible. And reduce risk to acceptable levels. We use controls to bring high risk down to a more acceptable level. But it all has to make sense financially. A real world example could be a streaming service. The outcome, we're seeking entertainment. The cost is the subscription and maybe the device. The risk is downtime or poor quality. Our perceived value depends on the customer's assessment of all three together. They don't live in a vacuum. They influence each other. Key takeaways: outcome, costs, and risk jointly influence our perceived value. And so we must manage all three. ITIL focuses on understanding the customer's perspective of things. And always remember that. Customer or consumer, their version of value, their perception of value is the most important. Effective service management is optimizing the balance of those three things. So make sure that you're committed to delivering meaningful outcomes from the point of view desired by the consumer, the end customer. Manage your cost effectively. Mitigate your risks. For the exam, the questions often test the idea high outcomes do not guarantee value. Don't be tricked by that. High outcomes with high risk is quite often undesirable. Value depends on the balance of outcomes, costs, and risks. The distractor, forgive me, the thing that's meant to trick you. A service works but is frequently unavailable. That lacks warranty and it is undesirable. Value increases when outcomes rise and the costs and risks diminish. So once again, we must develop consistent metrics to measure these over time. If we're going to monitor something, we have to have a way of monitoring it. I am 182 centimeters, not 182 inches, thank goodness. These metrics must be easy to measure, indicative of the outcomes, costs, and risks involved, easy to maintain, and consistent. Organizations evaluate trade-offs constantly, so these things need to be measured constantly. A good place for automation if possible. Thank you for joining us on this video lecture series. We hope to see you again soon.